Hi everyone, Paula O'Sullivan here. I just thought I'd make another video. I wanted to share with you about stroke recovery, what I did using imagination and visualization. And I think this is a very important thing for people to know about, because a lot of people don't actually know the importance of this in helping with neuroplasticity of the brain and helping you in your recovery if you've had a stroke. Or perhaps if you're caring for someone who's had a stroke, you might maybe share this with me if it's of interest to them, you know. So anyway, a year ago, if you haven't seen any of my other videos, a year ago in July 24, I had a stroke that left me paralysed on the left hand side of my body and in hospital for 3.5 weeks and then another 4.5 weeks in rehabilitation. And where I am now at the moment, I have got, this is my left hand, I've got use of this back. It's still very heavy, doesn't always do what I want it to do, but I've got good quality of movement in it, and I got my leg moving again, but I use, as you can see behind me there, I have a rollator and a walking stick, and I can't really walk. I shuffle around the house without the stick on occasion to try and just not be so dependent on a stick, but I really can't walk very far. I get very, very tired and I lose my balance, so it's a bit dangerous as well. So I mostly use a stick around the house, and I use the rollator when I'm out if I try to walk, and I'm always pushing myself to go a bit further and a bit further. And some days I get a bit further and then I might get set back for 3 or 4 days, and that's just where we are at the moment. I'm a year on with this and every day is different. It's not linear progress with a stroke, you know. So anyway, when I found myself fully paralysed and in hospital the first week, I was in utter despair. I was in a place of victimhood. I started falling into an edge of depression, as well, as I'd like to call it. But I had done a lot of work on myself previously before the stroke. I do a lot of mental and emotional work on myself, self-hypnosis. I'm a trained hypnotherapist and everything like that. Hadn't worked at it for about 8 years before the stroke because of other personal situation had happened to me. But I had a lot of training and self-training as well in this area of visualization and imagination and all, which really, I will talk about it in another video, but I want to show what I've kind of done with it with the stroke, which is this. It's all work in progress with me at the moment. So anyway, I found myself in depression, and my definition of depression was, now this was previous to the stroke, and I couldn't remember hardly anything at the stroke, but coming into the second week, when my nervous system started becoming regulated again, because I was in fight and flight with the stroke and everything like that, and stuff that had happened just prior to the stroke. So when I started coming down back into myself, my mind, the oxygen, briefly, when you're in fight and flight, the oxygen that you need to think clearly travels down into your heart and lung area to get you ready to fight or flee whatever threat you've been facing. But when you've had a stroke, you're stuck there. You can't fight or flee, and you can't think clearly, because obviously there's damage to your brain, so you're not going to be able to think clearly anyway. But being in fight and flight is not going to help that anyway. So as I started coming back out of fight and flight, at least a little bit of oxygen went back up into my brain area, and I was able to remember a few little things. So I remembered that my definition of depression was my non-acceptance of my current or past or future reality, and that's the inability to do anything about it. That was my definition of depression. And I remember that, and I said, you know what, and I was on the knife edge of despair, hopelessness and despair, and then, you know, 1 minute I'd swing into wild hope that things would just suddenly get better, and, you know, get out of this horrible situation, and then in the next moment I'd swing back into how hopeless it was, and how long was this ever going to take to recover, and was I ever going to recover, you know. So swinging wildly between the two. And I was out of my own environment. At home here, I have a quiet space. I live with my 2 grown-up children, and, you know, it's a quiet enough space. But, you know, suddenly I found myself in a very busy hospital, lots of staff coming and going, lots of visitors coming and going, and it was very dysregulating for me. So anyway, in that second week, I remembered about the depression thing, and I said, well, I have a choice here to go into a depression, or I can see what I can do to maybe try and get better. And I said to myself, you know what, I said, I'll use this as a research project on myself to see what can I do with what I know from my previous work that I've done on myself. What can I do on myself to maybe make this a bit better, or maybe get myself moving my arm and leg. I didn't even know if that was possible at the time, but I said I will try. And I did. I started trying, and there was days, obviously, physio and OT were in. It was exhausting, you know, trying to do exercises, trying to lift an arm and a leg, and it's dead heavy, and it just doesn't want to move, you know. So I mean, I was mentioning in the last video that I actually started grabbing this was my left arm, this was the affected arm, this is my right arm. I started grabbing it and moving it and increasing muscle memory, and I started doing lots of different things like that. I mentioned that in the last video I did. But while I was doing that, I was also using imagination and visualization as well. So I started trying to imagine what it would have been like to walk and move my arm again, and of course that was like a huge big leap. It was too much for my little mind at the time to manage, because I couldn't focus on anything for very long. It's a very short attention span after having a stroke, depending on the damage that's been done. One woman even beside me in the next part of the ward said to me, I can't even pray. And like, that was, you know, something that she had off by repetition since she was a child, and she couldn't even remember to do that. And I do a lot of spiritual work, and I was finding it very difficult to do my spiritual work, which would be similar to praying. It would be different mantras and affirmations I would have used on a regular basis before the stroke. I was finding that difficult to even remember stuff like that, or if I could remember it all, just to even focus or stay focused enough to do it, you know. So that's kind of where I was. So in between kind of feeling exhausted with trying to do physio, and then I remembered again, luckily, something I had read a few years ago about a test that had happened with athletes, and they had they'd wired them up with electrodes just to check muscle movements and stuff, and they had a group that trained really hard and they tested them for their strength and everything like that, and then they had a group that just sat in a chair and just imagined that they were doing the same kind of workouts and everything like that. And then they had another group in the middle of all of that who did a little bit of both. They sat there for part of the day visualizing themselves achieving stuff, and then they also went out and did a bit of training, and they were the most successful of the group. But the interesting thing was, both groups, the ones who just visualized and the ones who trained, there wasn't actually much difference when they tested the muscle movements. There wasn't actually that much difference. So I had that memory of it, and I said, well, I'll incorporate this into what I'm trying to do. So there'd be days I'd wake up. I find, because I was a hypnotherapist, what I learned in my training was that first thing in the morning when you just wake up, and last thing at night just as you're drifting off to sleep, are the best times to put a suggestion into your mind or to use your imagination, because you're highly susceptible to suggestion. You're actually hypnotic, and whatever you're thinking about with deep feeling goes straight into your subconscious mind, and your subconscious mind is what really runs the show. It can focus on about 30,000 different things all at once. It's what gets you home when you're driving and you've got your mind full of stuff. It gets you there, you know. It's what helps you to breathe and digest and many different things that it does for us, that we don't even have to think twice about. Whereas our conscious mind, it can only focus between 5 and 9 things at any one time, you know. And I remember this from my training, and since I trained back in 2011 as a hypnotherapist, I've been incorporating this every single day. For 16 years I was doing it, you know, before the stroke. So suddenly, as I say, little memories of stuff like this, my previous training, came back to me. So I decided, well, you know, when I wake up, I will just focus on walking again, you know, if I can. And if I can't, I'll focus on moving my toe or moving my foot or moving my arm. And if I can't do that, I will imagine just remembering when I used to move my arm, remembering when I used to move my leg, you know, all sorts of things like that. So I started imagining all of this, and then, as I say, there was days when I would say, right, I'm walking, you know. I knew I wasn't going to be, but in my mind I was walking in my favourite dress, around by my favourite place, and I was walking a good pace, and in my mind I was doing this. Now sometimes I know with visualization it's very difficult to actually get a picture in your mind, and a lot of the early work I did, I never got pictures in my mind, so I really had to work hard to kind of imagine. So I'm going to be talking about visualization and imagination. So imagination for me is, sometimes you'll have a picture in your mind, but a lot of times you may not. But if you can get the feeling, how does it feel to be walking again? The wind in your hair, or if you've no hair, you know, what's it feel like? You know, the scents in the air, to bring up all of that, you know, the feeling. I don't know if some of you may not like even exercise, but I used to love, and I still do, I love going out for a walk, and I love getting the sense of all the different shrubbery and everything that I'm passing, you know, and I love looking and seeing if the sky is really blue or something like that. I love seeing the colour of the leaves up against that, different times of the year, all sorts of stuff like that. I get great joy out of that. So I started bringing all of that back into my mind, the sheer joy, the relief. Oh, I'm out for a walk again, you know. I never even entertained a stick or a rollator in my mind. I just would see myself walking, you know. And I haven't achieved that yet, but I've got out with the rollator, and I still walk along and I look and there might be someone walking in front of me, and I'm still saying to myself, that'll be me, that'll be me. So that's where I'm at with that. I found that I was mentioned in the other video, I started getting headphones and getting a playlist and listening to music that I love, and using my arm, you know, grabbing my arm, my affected arm, and creating muscle memory. So while I was doing that, then I started imagining this image of a woman came into my mind, someone running, someone very fit looking, you know, fitter than me, and she was in my mind, she was running just ahead of me, you know, and I said, you know what, I'm going to try and catch it up with her. And I started making this into a little game with my mind to see, in my mind, could I catch up with this woman in front of me running and borrow her strength, you know. And sometimes I managed and sometimes I didn't, but when I did catch up, it was like a burst of energy. It was like, I've got that. That's the exhilaration of that woman running and the strength in her legs and everything. And I would just imagine running with her. And then, you know, obviously my mind would get tired and I'd end up coming back out of it. But I started doing all these little mental exercises with myself to try and get some strength back in, you know. So I started doing the same with my arm. I would imagine, you know, initially, I mentioned in the other video, I managed to open a sugar sachet was one of the first things. So that didn't just happen, you know. If you have it in your mind, you're already halfway there. So you start having to put these pictures into your mind first and believing that it's true. That's the hard part, because when we're after finding ourselves paralysed or something like that, suddenly all our self-confidence is gone, and suddenly we can't believe that it's possible. And obviously it's to do with the brain injury as well that we have, whatever's after happening us. We find it very difficult to actually believe that we could ever be the way we were before, you know. So I started doing a lot of these exercises and that to see where we could go with that, you know. So I'd imagine opening the sachet, and then I would, like I was saying about that, I started moving my affected hand into the shape of it and trying to pinch it onto the sachet. And I kept going in every day. I kept trying this, and it was frustrating some days, but I kept trying it. But I also had it in my mind, the picture of me actually opening the sachet. So that was quite powerful as well. So I started doing that, and then I remembered I had a thing called a mind movie visualization I used to use when I was doing hypnotherapy with my clients, and it was to help them to move forward out of their present situation. So I just want to share that with you now. So if you want to, it's up to yourself. If you want to close your eyes, if you have a moment, or come back and play this again when you can. So just close your eyes and take a few slow deep breaths. Now, I normally do it much deeper and much slower, but I know people are mostly breathing from this part up. So I'm going to do it slow for any of you who are at that stage, and maybe I'm going a bit fast even for some of you. Just do it in your own time, in your own space. Nice breath in 3 times and then out. And one more time. Breathing out. So your eyes closed, and you're just going to imagine going into your own private movie theatre. Maybe you won the lotto or something. But you're going into this room and it's perfectly safe. And you're going to imagine sitting down on a seat somewhere and looking up at the screen, big screen. And somewhere on there is a freeze frame of your life right now, wherever you're at. So I'm going to just say, this is where I was at. I was looking at myself in the hospital, paralysed, you know, and I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to stay there. I wanted to be initially just able to move, starting to move my arm, starting to move my leg, making some progress, and getting myself, you know, ready for the next stage where I could build up strength that I could actually start walking and moving my arm again. So whatever it is in your mind, you have it on freeze frame. You have your present situation, and I'd like you to think about what you would like to happen next. So just focusing on the next part of your journey. What's your little goal? I started setting little goals for myself. I set a goal of opening a sugar sachet. I set a goal of trying to get my arm to stay on the Sara steady. I set goals of being able to brush my own teeth. All sorts of little stuff. I set goals of being able to help with my clothes, pulling my clothes on myself, because I was completely dependent on everybody. So whatever stage you're at, so just think about that, and when you're ready I want you to press play. And we're going to let this, it's like a mind movie of you. You're in it and you're doing the things you'd like to do. So just letting yourself go through it, feeling the feelings you'd like to feel, seeing the things you'd like to see, hearing the things you'd like to hear, and letting this movie play forward. Hearing people saying things about you, going, you're doing great, well done, keep going. Anything like encouraging like that that you can imagine. And just play it through for a few more moments, feeling the feeling you want to feel, hearing the things you want to hear, seeing the things you want to see. And then when you're ready, just press pause for a moment. And we're going to pretend this is like an old video, that when you rewind it back, it makes that funny kind of noise and it goes. So we're going to rewind it all the way back to the start. And think about any changes or any improvements you'd like to make on that. So something you'd like to try. This is not easy work, I'm not going to lie to you. This is going to take a lot of practice. But the more you practice, the easier it gets, because you set up new neural pathways in your brainwave, and it'll make it easier. Because if you think about it, and just briefly just say in the middle of this, that you know, as a child you were born and you had to learn to walk and talk and dress yourself and feed yourself. And how did you do it? You did it through repetition. Now, you didn't have the same mind as an adult. We pull in all this negative stuff of I can't do this. Initially as a child you would have just gone for it and given it a go. Well, the same is for me after a stroke. I felt like a child. I felt like a child having to do everything again, and I wasn't able to, and I needed help. So it took a lot of repetition to get myself back there, to be able to wash and dress myself and everything like that. So I want you to imagine this second part of your movie now, that you know you're actually getting these things back for yourself, this independence back. And initially you might be getting help, but you know, eventually your end goal may be to just become a bit more independent with all of this. So when you're ready with the changes, press play, and I want you to imagine your life as you would like it to be, even if it's only just the next little step forward. Imagining it as you would like it to be, seeing it if you can see it, hearing it if you can hear, feeling the feelings. For me, feeling of relief, you know, hey, and a feeling of the big win. I've done something here and I feel really proud of myself and well done. So feeling those feelings of courage and determination. So feeling the feelings you'd like to feel, seeing the things you'd like to see, and hearing the things you'd like to hear. And letting this movie play forward again. And we're going to press pause again. And one more time we're going to rewind it back like this noisy video, all the way back to the start. And again, just to think on it. Where would you really like to be from now? Do you know, even the end result can be good too. And what would you have to do to get to that end result? What exercises are you going to have to do? What kind of thoughts are you going to have to think? What kind of attitude are you going to have to get where you want to go next? So when you have those changes in mind, we're going to do this one more time. And I would encourage you to play this video back and do it. You know, when you get the hang of this, you can do it yourself. You don't need me to guide you through it. Eventually. You know, but maybe for the first few times, listen to me and just see and get that idea in your mind and play it in your mind when you can. So just imagine with the changes you want to change, just play this through one more time with all the improvements, thinking the kind of thoughts you need to think to get you there, doing the kind of things you need to do to get you there, feeling the feelings you'd like to feel, hearing what you'd like to hear, playing it now as you would love it to be. Feeling the feelings of joy and relief, happiness and pride that you've achieved some of these things for yourself. Feeling really good in yourself. Hearing the things you'd like to hear, seeing the things you'd like to see, feeling the things you'd like to feel. Doing the things you'd like to do. And when you're ready, just press stop and save. So I'd like you to think about this as something you can use when you're waking up in the morning, allow yourself a little bit of time, depends where you are of course. You can wake up, I used to set my alarm to wake myself up a little bit earlier than all the staff would be coming around. And I would have a bit of space before they came around doing blood pressures and all the rest. I'd have a little bit of space when I was in the hospital to have this moment for myself, to visualise what I wanted to be working out for me, and where did I want to go next, and what goals did I want to set next for myself. At night time you can go retire a little bit earlier. I used to find the visiting hours in the hospital a nightmare. I have Asperger's as well, so I get dysregulated very easily, and I'm a very sensitive person, so I'm very sensitive to noise, sounds, lights, you name it. So I found it, I had to bring in an eye mask for myself and headphones, and when there sometimes would be 25 visitors in the room all talking at the same time. I couldn't handle it, so I wouldn't have visitors in the evening. It was too much for me. I'd ask them to come in the day instead. So I would put my eye mask on, I'd put my headphones on, and I would just be listening to either solfeggio frequencies are brilliant for helping you regulate your nervous system again. I brought my blood pressure and everything. I did all sorts of work with solfeggio frequencies. But sometimes I'd just listen to a bit of music, and then I would be doing the mind movie for myself. And, you know, all the different variations of what I wanted to happen for myself. And sometimes I wasn't only able to focus for about 2 minutes maybe, you know, sometimes 10 minutes. You know, by the time I'd finished, I was able to do 20 minutes. I still do this every morning, every evening, because I'm not finished with my journey with this yet. My end goal is full recovery. Whether I'll ever get there, I do not know, but I'm going to keep trying, and I'm going to do everything in my power to keep trying. So just remember this: if you can have a positive mindset, and it's not about deluding yourself, it's about having hope. It's about having a bit of hope that there might be something you can do that might change things. So I started taking it was like curious. I was curious, you know, and I said, right, I've nothing, you know, I won't lose face if I lose. I've nothing to lose is where I was coming from. I was going, okay, I'm going to try, and if I win on this, brilliant, and if I don't, well, look, I'm just going to accept where I'm at, but I'm certainly not going to give up trying. So anyway, I don't want to make these videos too long, so if you have any questions or anything I can help you with, please do reach out and ask, and I will help where I can. But I found visualizing and imagination very, very powerful way of actually, you know, helping me with my attempts at exercises. And as I say, I did actually get good movement in both of my hands now. And I say the left one is still heavy and doesn't always work properly, but I have good quality of life in that I can move my hands now. So, and just to show you again, left and right. Not always easy, very stiff. Still very stiff, but good. Look, it looks normal, but for me it's stiff and feels like a tight elastic band, I suppose the best way of describing it, you know. But anyway, I hope this video helps somebody out there. Please feel free to share, reach out if you can, if you want to. If it makes a difference to you at some stage, do let me know. I'd love a bit of feedback on it, and I wish you all a very, very blessed day. Take care of yourselves.